There we go.
You ready?
Yep.
All right, it is 6 o'clock, October 6th. I call the meeting to order. You can stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alicia, can you do roll call, please?
Yep. Steve Degelau.
Here.
Corey Miller.
Here.
Ian McDonald.
Here.
Lori Belargin. Here. Bruce Belargin.
Here.
Danny Erickson. Here. Matt Pugall.
Here. District mission, core values, protocol reminders, they're all on the agenda. Take a look, refresh your memory of them, and when someone's ready, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda.
Motion by Bruce, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Steve, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item number 2, public comment. Anybody in the audience looking to give public comment tonight? I received no requests, did you?
Nope.
Okay. One more call, anybody? No? Moving on, item number 3, this is the petition to alter school district boundaries. Attached is information, we talked about it last meeting, and I'll pass it to Dr. Granville.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so this is sort of a unique one in that there are several layers to this situation. So this is a second application essentially. So this application for the petition came through previously. The board acted. Ultimately, the petition was denied because both districts did not agree. There was an appeal process in place, and that brings us to the point we are now. When an appeal goes to DPI, once that decision has been rendered, there's a waiting period for the families to come back with the petition again. That petition then would be eligibly reconsidered July 1 of the following school year, so this upcoming July. So there are essentially, this petition, there's nothing to do with it technically because it doesn't exist because it's outside of the, or it's not past that window. So as a board, you would have to make 2 separate decisions. One is, are you willing to reconsider that timeline and waive that requirement? I believe both affected districts would have to vote to do that. And then subsequently, then that petition would be live, and then you would have to consider that petition. There's a lot of information in here. Most of the information in the memo is directly from DPI. I pulled out the information that was pertinent to this case specifically. If you go to the website, there's a lot more there. But I pulled out the information that was most pertinent to us, got the background there, and then the petition process, which we've talked about. The fact that there's board action. That board action typically takes place in February. That's when boards will make the decision to consider these petitions. So this petition is in early, even earlier than that timeline would require. And then that reorganization becomes effective July 1. It's not, even if you acted early, it's not like the reorganization takes place earlier. That doesn't happen until July 1 of the subsequent school year. And then there's the appeal process. I included that information because that has already been impacted with this decision. The petition goes to the state superintendent, and they have an appeal panel. That appeal panel is given criteria to consider, but essentially they can make the decision however they see fit based on the merits of that petition. That is more retrospective information that has already occurred. We know what that decision was. Ultimately, it was denied. There's another thing that we have to consider. I included this, so if you see it, you understand it. The reality is the impact is minimal, but if once that petition would be accepted and property is detached, the attaching district has to assume the assets and liabilities proportionately of that property. So I included a comparison of 2 properties that are under consideration for this petition. So we have an understanding of what that financial impact would be. It is negligible. I don't really think that would be something that you'd have to put too much consideration in, that specific consideration. Then other considerations, and this I do believe is important. One is the precedent setting of waiving that waiting period. That waiting period is put in place for a couple of reasons. One is we don't want to have a situation where people can keep on going back with the same question and burdening both the school districts and potentially the state if there's an appeal. But it also gives us enough time to consider any of the factors and understand if there's circumstances that have changed. What makes this also unique is we are aware that there is a swap in consideration. That makes it easier to consider in as much as two properties swapping makes it a little bit easier to understand why any district would say yes to detaching, because that's it's an economic disadvantage to have property detached. Obviously, it shrinks our tax base. But then the swap sort of equals that out. But in this case, we really are only considering the one petition from the Newman property, because that's the only one that we've officially received. It is my understanding that the Osceola School District will wait until we decide, as a Somerset School District, what we're doing. I don't know if that's official, but that is my understanding of where their stance is. So the precedent setting of waiving that timeline is a concern. I don't want to overstate the concern. It's not something, we're not going to be legally bound to that precedent, but it could get messy for us if we waive it and then we have this happen in the future, that we just say, well, yeah, just come back to us and we'll waive it. So I don't see a huge disadvantage just to waiting till July 1 and have the families consider the petition at that point. The other petition, my understanding, was never submitted previously, so that's sort of a fresh petition that does need to be considered. So the Wallen petition, which we have not yet received, I believe that's in the hands of Osceola, is really a separate argument altogether, because my understanding is that is an original petition, not one that's coming after appeal. So that's sort of where we are. In terms of board action, if you do nothing, take no action, that petition dies because it would be not past that waiting period. So you don't have to take official action saying we are not going to consider waiving. You could do nothing, and that is essentially saying we're not waiving. If that ultimately were the decision that were made, out of courtesy, I would call the family to let them know that we won't be considering it. They'd be welcome to reapply when the time, that time limit has expired. So that's where we are with that. Information at this point and discussion, I'll certainly answer any questions. It is relatively complicated, so I don't know if I'm gonna be able to answer all the questions, but I'll jot them down and get answers if you have stuff that I don't know.
What questions does anyone have?
Is it possible to accept it with conditions?
Yes.
Is there anything?
Yes, so ultimately, if the board decides to entertain the petitions, whether that is early or after that July 1, it would be my very strong recommendation that that proposal for the motion that would be made from the board would include those contingencies. And I'm sure that Osceola would want to do the same thing. So assuming that Somerset decides to approve said attachment, this would go in effect if and only if the same thing was happening on that opposite property. Because yeah, we wouldn't want to be in a situation where one district says yes, the other says no, and then one loses property and no one gains. Yep.
Any other questions?
How often do these requests come in? Is it somewhat rare?
It's not all that rare. I mean, in my experience, my previous district, I think it would be more rare that it didn't happen in a year, or maybe every other, somewhere in there. It all depends. The situations are always very unique, and we're in a part of the state where we have some of those goofy boundaries, where we have islands.
Like that map.
Yeah, if you take a look at that map, you can see where that pink color, and you can see islands, where there's a pink island in the middle of New Richmond. So we have islands in Osceola, New Richmond, and Hudson, and then those districts also have islands. That's usually where it occurs, where you've got an overlap of boundaries. So like the neighborhood I live in, so I'm in the Somerset School District, but I have Hudson buses that have to drive all the way down the end of the street through Somerset, pick up in what is Hudson, and then turn around and drive back through. So those are usually where those situations occur.
Other questions? I think we just have to remember that we're looking at this petition to detach with no swap right now. We have to remember that. I think if and when we see the other side, then I think it would be worth a conversation, but at this point, I don't know why we would waive the deadline or the date for a decision that we already
It'd
made.
be courtesy of their planning purposes, right? Because it wouldn't officially happen until after July.
That's
15th,
exactly
right?
right, yes.
So it's kind of
Mhm. Yeah, and so everyone has an understanding where it's heading. I think that's why it came in early. Yep. There was a question actually, if, would we consider having it go in effect early? I don't believe we have that option. Statutorily, it goes in effect July 1 if the decision was made to attach and detach. I don't think there's any way we have that happen earlier, and that would get super messy in terms of school funding. So that, I don't believe, is an option.
Is the map of the properties shown somewhere? Does it make sense?
Yeah, so I don't have those attached. We do have the maps. So the way it works out, property A would create an island, property B would not. So, and though that's the main reason you look at the maps is to consider that. There is some concern of like a domino effect with the property that is looking to detach and go into Osceola. Do we create a situation where we create sort of a pipeline for future detachment? And that's a legitimate concern, because if things go to appeal for DPI, one of the things they're supposed to consider is, are we creating an island? So if we create a situation where, although we create this one island for Osceola, do we end up creating a potential domino where other properties could then detach more easily and even if they go to appeal? So that's something we need to consider.
Is there any variables we don't understand about like open enrolling versus, officially being in the district?
Yeah, so and that's always an option. The open enrollment option is always available. There are limitations on open enrollment. We make the annual determination in terms of space. So both districts, depending on what those determinations are, there could be limits there. Could be by grade level, could be by programming. So there would be some concern, but for the most part, like, we are very wide open for open enrollment, so we wouldn't see that being an issue in the short term.
Well, they last February or January kind of sent, it was attached to the meeting then of kind of why and what their reasons were for wanting to be in Osceola. I think if you want to look back at that meeting,
Okay.
that would have a lot of the info
Okay.
of their situation, I guess.
And I can send the maps, so you can see the maps, because those, Osceola has prepared the maps with both properties highlighted, so I can send those out, so you can take a look.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other questions, comments? So this is not on here for any action tonight, it's information only. I think we keep this open as a possibility. If there's additional information that comes forward, there's another application for a swap, we can have that discussion then.
Yep, absolutely.
Agree? Okay.
But this won't come back.
This won't come back until there's, if there's two board members that want it back, we will bring it back. If there's, new information, it will come back, but other than that, it will just kind of sit in a holding pattern. Everyone in agreement with that? Yep. Okay. All right, item number 4, compensation.
All right, I'm gonna start this one out. We have Rod listed, and Rod's here for backup with specific data. He knows the numbers well, but this is something we've worked on together with Rochelle in HR. And there's been some movement on this. You all know we got some confusing financial news. It turned out to be just fine, but during that time there was a little bit of concern. But we landed in a good spot. So first of all, one thing that I had mentioned, actually even during the application process, but certainly shortly after I was hired, that one thing we want to be able to do is get compensation conversations to happen earlier and have that built into the budget. Rod has built a budget that includes compensation in it for next year. So we won't be in the situation next year where we're talking in October about compensation when we're 3 months into the year. That's not good for morale, it's not good for recruitment and retention, and it's honestly just not good for fiscal management. So we'll be in a much better position going into next year. Along with that, because the timeline will be moved up and we'll be making decisions that make sense from a business model, when 80% of your budget is people expense, including salaries and benefits. You wanna make those decisions up front and not have that be an afterthought. We'll be able to do that, we'll be able to listen to folks, talk to individual groups ahead of time, get that input, and then put together a proposal that makes sense. Having said that, so this was a little bit accelerated. We rushed through, as has been the case, I think, in the last couple of years, but now we'll be out of that cycle. Our recommendation is a 3% increase across the board. The only folks that wouldn't apply to is people that signed individual contracts. I think there's only a couple of them in the district, and I think they're probably standing or sitting right over here on this end of the table. It would apply to everyone else in the district. Even if you moved positions, because if you moved positions in the district, the wage or salary that was part of the hiring agreement was based on last year's wages. So they would have that same increase. So this is steps plus 3% across the board, and then a 5% increase for special education paraprofessionals. This is something we've been talking about for a while too. Our special education paraprofessionals are the group that is most out of whack when we look at comparables and most at risk for not sticking with us, quite honestly. This is an emergency measure. This isn't a long-term strategic measure. We need to be very strategic and look at all employment groups without a doubt. And there are some others that are out of whack. We'll be talking about those as we continue to build the model. Having said that, so as an example, we still have an open position in special education paraprofessional ranks that has not been filled. We're hopeful we'll be filling it this week, but we don't know. We went a full year without one position filled, and it's not getting any better. We're losing to neighboring districts. This 5% increase won't fix the problem. This is a good step in the right direction, but what it does do for us, it creates a new role on our salary grid. It creates a special education paraprofessional role as its own group that can be considered separately. Right now, they're lumped together with all paraprofessionals. I want to make this crystal clear. This is about the market. This is not about appreciation for folks that work hard. We know that our support staff work very, very hard, and we couldn't function without them. And we also know that many of our support staff positions are below the median of our comps. We don't know with absolute certainty. If you click on that comparability study, you can see that it's incomplete. I shouldn't say we're certain they are low, but we don't have a real comprehensive look at the comparables to have hard data, but we know they're low. That will be the conversation that we have going into next year. Quite honestly, when we look at this, like, our teacher group is pretty solid. Certified staff is in a pretty good place in terms of the comparability. So if we stick with modest cost of living increases and steps, I think for the foreseeable future anyway, we'll be in an okay position there with some minor tweaks that might be necessary from time to time, but pretty solid. It is definitely support staff that is going to be our greatest area of concern and focus. This is not something that is unique to us. It's happening in a lot of districts, but most of our neighboring districts have gotten to it quicker, and they are beating us, quite honestly, and we're losing staff to them specifically, so we need to do a better job there. But the emergency is special education paraprofessionals, and that's what this proposal represents. Listed the priorities there so you can see what that's all about. And you can see also we have the step movement is about a 1.5% increase for support staff and supervisory support staff and administration, and then it ranges on teachers based on where they are in the grid.
Any questions on that?
So, I don't know, we didn't really discuss, I'm, used to the private sector. So, understanding, we're talking about across the board. So, say teacher A and teacher B, they're both at the same level. So, what about merit? Is that what we're talking about regarding steps, or is it just across the board?
So it's a good question, Steve. Right now, this isn't a merit-based system. So when Act 10 went into effect, some districts did move to a merit-based system. I believe that in Somerset, there was some merit-based structure at some point. Is that?
I believe we were working towards that, yes.
Okay. But this is more of a traditional steps and lanes, and yeah, that it is different than most private sector situations where some level of merit or contribution is included. This is not that. This is a traditional steps and lanes where it's a combination of years of service and education that for the most part drives the system for certified staff, and then years of service primarily for support staff.
Is that something we can incorporate eventually?
It's a good question because Act 10 is, there is some question whether or not Act 10 will remain in place. So it is going to be considered by the Wisconsin Supreme Court. If it is stricken down, that would not be likely something we'd even be able to do. There are ways, so in my previous district, we did have a merit-based system. There are certainly advantages, but there are also pretty distinct disadvantages, so you have to be really, really thoughtful and careful when you build a system, because the product that we produce is student learning. And there's so many variables that play into that. It's not that it's impossible, but we just have to be very careful as we go down that road. And my recommendation is we wouldn't consider that until we know what's gonna happen with Act 10 and know what the legal parameters are, so we don't go down a road, waste a bunch of time, get people worked up, and then find out that we can't do it anyway. But yeah, I understand the concern and the vision.
On the comp sheet, there's a lot of districts that have done 3% and 4% this year.
Mm-hmm.
Is that typical, or?
So it is typical this year in that CPI, so if you're in a situation where the school district has a certified bargaining unit and teachers are a certified bargaining unit, meaning they're unionized essentially, 2.95 was the consumer price index that at the time, I think it's the July CPI number that you have to use as the basis for that conversation. That was 2.95, so 3s were very common because that kept up with the cost of living. If we're in a different situation, there were a few years ago when inflation was through the roof, we saw 7s, 8s, and 9s on that chart. If inflation slows down or flattens out, then we'd see different numbers there as well. But that's, for the most part, what drives that.
Other questions? No? Okay, so this will, well, do you want to go into Rod's conversation?
Well, yeah, actually, there's not too much separate, other than the budget. So he was just here to answer the hard questions. Those were pretty easy, so I could handle those. If he asks the tough ones, it goes to Rod.
But this will come back then for action in 2 weeks?
Yes, exactly.
Right?
This is in the budget, the numbers that you just presented to us are in this budget summary, correct?
Correct.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Before we move on, I just want to say how much I appreciate you and Rod doing this work, because I have hated for the last several years ending up being in October before we're having this conversation. And as a board, we have frequently asked for this to be done in a more timely manner. So thank you very much for the work that you've done on this and making it happen.
You're very welcome, but that's big thanks to Rod. He built the budget, so he did great work getting us there. Did you have something?
I do. Is any of this, is this possible because of the 10% levy that is recommended?
Yeah, absolutely. This is possible because of the budget hearing and the annual meeting budget that we brought forward. That this is the first time we've had these numbers built in, and we didn't wait till the end. So certainly that there's a direct connection there. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this will come back in 2 weeks for action. That pay adjustment then will be retroactive to the start of the contract, July 1 for both back pay.
Yep.
Okay. All right, moving on to item number 5, budget update.
All right, so this one I'll just kick off and I'm going to turn right over to Rod. So as we mentioned earlier, there was a period of about 48 hours where neither Rod nor I slept at all when we were a little worried about numbers coming in. It turned out that they were much more favorable than feared. So we're relatively close to where we were at the annual meeting. Ultimately, what we're going to be recommending is a slight under levy, meaning the recommendation is not to levy to the max, but instead let the local levy staying exactly at the level that we talked about at the annual meeting. We feel it's important, if there wasn't a big shift, to stick with those numbers. When Rod goes through these numbers, also to know that these are based on the third Friday count, so they're a little bit more accurate than what we had. That's just the way this goes. We'll start talking about the budget in February for next year. Those numbers will be super preliminary, based on a ton of assumptions, but we'll list those assumptions. And then when those assumptions are no longer assumptions and they're facts, we'll let you know, now this one is locked in, now this one is locked in. So every month or every other month, depending on when we get new information, as soon as we have new information, we'll rework the budget model and we'll bring it to you. So we'll have looked at it several times before we're asking you or the public to weigh in on it. This is not that case. This is now, we have this look right now, and then October 15th. October 15th are the official numbers. That's when we'll get the final aid numbers from the state. That'll be the real data that you ultimately will be acting on October 22nd, when we certify the levy. We would not anticipate any big shifts between now and October 22nd because we're using real numbers for the most part all the way through those assumptions. Might there be a minor shift here or there? It is entirely possible, but we wouldn't anticipate anything really significant or anything that would need to adjust our budget or our plan for investing. So with that, turn it over to Ron.
All right, so I think you guys all have the summary budget, and I'm just gonna kind of highlight some of the numbers that have changed since the annual meeting. As Dave mentioned, we had the scare where we thought we were gonna lose out on a lot of state aid. We had Bear take a look at it. We're actually only gonna lose, we're estimating 106,000 less than we previously thought at the annual meeting. So we decided we don't want to ask the taxpayers for that additional $106,000. So before at the annual meeting, we were looking at having a budget surplus of around 240,000. And now we're looking at having a deficit budget of about 125. That's after the pay increases and after that $106,000 less that we think we're gonna have.
Can I,
Yep,
so
jump in.
yeah, that's an important point. It goes to deficit because if you remember when we talked at the annual meeting, steps weren't included in those numbers.
Yep.
Now Rod has those built into the budget, so that took away that surplus, and then with this 106, that's what generated that.
Yep, so if you look at the state sources, source 600, we were originally projected to get about 10,650,000 from the state. They dropped that down to about 10,500,000. That could still change when we get the final numbers on October 15th, but we're not expecting it to change a whole lot.
Sorry, you're 10,500,000, we were at 10,600,000, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's 106,000 less than what we were anticipating before. So that's the main thing that changed. Our expenses went up a little bit based on the salary increases. Fund 27 went up a little bit, and that's due to the special ed staff and their pay increases. But then the bottom line is on the last page of this document. Well, one other thing that Dave and I talked about changing was, last year we levied 140,000 for community ed. I took a look at that, and we really only spent close to 100,000 last year. So we want to reduce that levy from 140 to 100,000 to help reduce the tax levy a little bit there. So the final number comes in at 12,656,000. At the annual meeting, it was 12,696,000, so the difference of that $40,000. At the annual meeting, the percentage increase was 10.11, now it drops us down to about 9.76. And then the mill rate drops from 7.11 to 7.06. So it's pretty comparable to where we were looking at before, even with the pay increases.
I have a question.
Yep.
So I'm assuming the SRO salary didn't change at all, which that was in that levy increase last year. So was it middle school athletics? That was just, we didn't need that much for that?
Correct.
Okay.
So we had a surplus left over from last year, and if we happen to go over that 100,000, we still have a little bit of surplus that we can work into that as well, so we're in a good spot there.
So you're proposing we go over budget right now, right?
Yep.
120,000 instead of, could we even levy for that full 120,000 or not?
The 106 we could, that amount we still could. Now, there's another factor in here too, that when we get actual numbers, the assumption that our FTE student count was slightly higher than the assumptions that the preliminary budget was based on, so that's gonna help us out a little bit. So yeah, we would have the statutory authority to levy to that full limit. Given the fact that the increase on the local levy was so significant, we know that we can make it with this amount. We thought we're better off keeping that levy amount the same, locking that in and not levying to the limit. It's not common, you're not gonna often hear me say I don't think it's a good idea to levy the limit, but given the amount of the increase in the local levy, I think this would be a year where we don't wanna push when we think we can get by without it. And also, just so everyone hears this, if things don't change, we will be having a conversation about an operational referendum in the future. So I want to be as fiscally responsible so we can demonstrate that this is how we do business, and that if we get to that point of needing a referendum, that we built a case for it over the couple of years that we have. I can't guarantee we'll have that need, but if things don't change with state funding, it likely will be the case. There aren't too many districts that aren't on an operational referendum right now. It's over 80%. We are right now with that $1 million in 2019, but that was a very conservative amount and was eaten up just in operational expenses and salaries like that. So, because you'll know, we had the $1 million increase and then $1.4 million in cuts shortly thereafter. So that's not the situation we want to be in. We really want to get ourselves in a long-term, healthy financial situation that helps us out on all levels. It helps us out with recruiting and retention, helps us take care of the facility so we don't end up wasting money in deferred maintenance. Just everything is better if we can be very strategic, and that's why this recommendation is to decrease that, or not to levy to the max this one time.
I understand your reasoning, and I don't not support it. But I would like to know, if we did levy to the limit, what that percentage and dollar amount would be. Because it looks like the difference was only 5 cents, and if we did levy to the limit, you know, how big a difference would that be?
The mill rate would jump from 706 to 712.
So just a 1 cent increase from what we talked about at the annual meeting.
Really?
The reason our mill rate is, well, there's two reasons, and I guess everyone that's dealing with mill rate issues, it's always the same two factors, but we have a lot of property value. It's increasing, so we have a wider base, and we are a frugal district. We don't spend a lot of extra money. We don't have a lot of extraneous, or we don't have any extraneous positions. We're very frugal and have been over time. That's what keeps that mill rate down, because that's gonna be almost a full dollar below state average in mill rate. And again, we can function with that, and we want to. And if we get to the point where we need to go back to the taxpayers, we wanna make sure that we can demonstrate the track record.
But technically, we gotta find another $100,000 in our budget.
Part of it, because the student count might help us out a little bit there too. And yes, but yeah, we will have to tighten the belts for about $100,000. Now, here's why I'm very comfortable with that. If you remember, when salaries weren't built in, we had to like wonder how much we're gonna tighten our belt just to afford cost of living increases. We don't need to do that. $100,000 in the large scheme of our entire budget, we can deal with that for 1 year just through kind of basic means. Now, might things come up, like could we have a horrible snow year where we're gonna spend way more on snow removal than we have in the past? Yeah, all those things could come true, but we're confident we can make this work this year.
Does not levying to the max affect future at all?
It does not.
Okay.
No, that's something, you probably even heard me say that, because we found out that is like a common misconception. We know for 1 year it has no impact, but we even think beyond there that common misconception that it really impacted your ongoing ability to levy, there's exemptions built in that offset that. So I wouldn't be concerned. Here's the thing, I appreciate the questions very much, because often it's gonna be the opposite conversation, where we're gonna be asking for something and have to make our case, so I totally get it, but just thinking, long-term, and we're still at a 9.76% increase in the local levy. Now, couple things, that doesn't mean a 9.6% increase in every taxpayer's taxes, because that's 9.67% based on a much larger tax base. Now, here's the next step to that though. If people's property valuation went up, whatever that percentage is, their taxes conceivably could go up more than that 9.76, could be less. Too many variables to predict exactly, but that's 9.76% increase in the dollars collected through the tax levy year over year, not an individual's tax rate.
I think it's my last thing I'll say, I'm with Lori. I mean, these numbers, to levy to the max, if they still put us at what we talked about in that annual meeting, why wouldn't we just do that to ensure we start to build some fund balance?
And that's where I'm at, like, we talked about being over the, 200,000 or 240, we were talking about the roof on this building, we were talking about, I don't know, whatever else we can kind of build for. I want you also to be looking at, like, I'm more looking at fund balance for these projects, not adding things to the school, not where can we spend more money, but what can we do to build that up? We've been talking about building that up since I was first on, the first referendum we went through with that extra million was that's gonna help us build this up.
Yep.
We wanted more, obviously,
Yep.
but they knew that million was gonna be close. So that's where I keep going with this, that trying to build that up to take care of these things, so we don't have to go back to.
We can also build it up if we don't go over budget. So there's two ways to go at that, not always pushing it.
But we're
all
already
in.
over budget, we're starting $100,000 over budget.
And 10%'s a pretty big chunk.
10% of the local to the, I mean, I think you gotta say, your 10%, your taxes aren't going up 10%,
No, I
it's
know.
10 more percent to the school, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep,
It's not-
absolutely.
It's not a 10% increase.
Yep, and
I
again,
said-
you
I
know,
said
like,
to the school
I
levy.
am not, I would never argue against levying to the max. If we would do that, and ultimately if that's what we decide, exactly what you're saying is what we need to do. So Fund 46 is a mechanism that we'll be talking about as we go into the next budget cycle. Fund 46 is a mechanism that allows us to save up for exactly that. So we have to have a 10-year long-term facility plan, and then once you invest, you have to wait 5 years. So my recommendation is, even if it's a small amount, that we do create a Fund 46 account. And then we can be very targeted and very strategic, like this is when we're going after this roof, here's when we're gonna get after parking lot repairs. So we don't end up in a situation where we fall into deferred maintenance crisis. My hope would be, and this is just a hope, because I'm basing it on nothing, there's no way to know what the next budget cycle would bring, is that we'll be in a position where we wouldn't see that much of an increase to the local levy. But yeah, I totally get where you're coming from, and trust me, it's not easy for me to recommend not levying to the max, because it's not like we're sitting on piles of cash and we don't know what to do with it. We're running tight already. But I also think it's very important that we build that trust. So if we get to that point of saying, okay, it's time to be thinking long-term, that we're positioned to do that.
We're looking at decreasing 5 cents per thousand rather than increasing by 1 cent.
Yep, so, and yes, so with that, there's or anything in between there, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be all or this 106. It can be anything in between there as well. That is entirely that's the board's decision. Again, it feels weird for me right now to be saying, but I don't think we should spend that, but you understand my position. I understand the logic of using those funds for the district and completely agree with that, but there's just a lot to consider.
One of my concerns is, you know, we've had a lot of discussion here about being transparent and showing the community that we're being frugal
Mhm.
and we're doing everything we possibly can to
Mhm.
manage our money. But how many people are gonna know that? Because they're not here. I mean, there are some
Mhm.
people here more than usual. Thank you for coming. But usually there's not.
Yeah.
And not very many, I mean, some people watch the meetings, but, I mean, it's not like we're breaking YouTube records.
Yeah.
So even though we're making this huge effort, how much is the community even going to realize it?
Well-
To that, can I answer that? Like, I think it's a philosophy, and just because the people that elected us aren't watching doesn't mean we don't owe
Right.
to them why they elected us, to represent what we think they would want if they were here.
Well, yeah, but we had 60 people here at our annual meeting.
Does that mean that those votes are more important than the ones that are not watching the video?
What?
You're saying the people that are present are pushing for something, and that's what I'm hearing, and that we should serve the will of those more than the will of those who maybe are not watching? Am I missing something? There's nobody watching, so let's max out the levy.
I can
No,
look at
that's
that.
not what I'm saying
Okay.
at all.
Please
I'm
clarify.
saying that we had obvious input from community members
Mhm.
supporting the budget. And the difference either way is negligible, 5 cents less versus 1 cent more. And the community made it very clear that they supported the budget presented at the annual meeting. I'm not.
Yeah.
Those members.
Yep, and yeah, you're both absolutely correct on this. The support that we had, those are the numbers we're bringing back, but we're bringing them back, they are less because we're bringing the local numbers back. It's exactly what everyone heard at the annual meeting in terms of the amount of the local levy, the dollar amount. That's what we locked in. Our state aid dropped a little bit.
Right.
That's the equation that we're dealing with. Ultimately, no matter what we decide, I can promise you it will be done with fiscal responsibility and we'll be careful. If we end up levying to the max, whatever surplus we have left, once we lock in what we want for a fund balance range, I would recommend we build up to the top of that fund balance range. And once we do that, we start moving that money into Fund 46, so then we can start addressing some of the long-term facility needs. If this budget did not include steps and 3%, I would absolutely be saying we need to levy to the max, because we have to have every bit of flexibility we have to make sure that we can handle compensation the way our folks deserve. The reason I'm comfortable with it is because we have that built in.
And
Great
also-
explanation.
What was that?
No, I mean, I like the fact that we're demonstrating fiscal responsibility, we're working hard at it, demonstrating that first before we're just off to the races. We've made some huge steps here, so already.
You guys have Oscar?
Yeah, just, calling back to meeting, with you and Rod, like, it's fairly complicated, so, I really appreciate the transparency and much clearer understanding now than before, and I think, I don't like a 10% just by, man, that's a lot, but understanding, and it's important, I think, to keep reiterating that you guys were handed a fairly, you can rephrase it as you wish, but, not very well planned out budget, and I didn't even realize at the time just how kind of undefined it was, up until just annual meeting. So, that's what kind of gives me the ability to go, all right, we'll kind of swallow this one, but very much looking forward to next year and the planning and that brings increased transparency with knowing the details of what we're shooting for with priorities.
Did we know the state was going to withhold that much money? Did
No.
anybody know that?
No,
So with
that's,
an unplanned budget, I don't know what backhanded comment that is. But I
Backhanded?
would say, they were given a purse, I would say that, I'm just trying to figure out what you're saying here, that I don't think anyone knew the state was gonna say, hey, we're gonna cut all this money, so you locally now need
It's way more
to.
to it than that.
Because I think our total has gone up the same
We
as
kind
it's
of
been
guessed
every
what
other
happened.
year. The
It
state,
was-
Everybody
it was
knew
an open
about
ended
Governor
thing.
Evers' line item veto a long time
Yeah,
ago.
we knew it was coming. It
That
was
was
maybe
part of
bigger
this.
than some expected, but, you know, things were a little chaotic last year and the budget was what it was, and then we had high turnover in that department. So there was a lot to be dealt with, to the point where we got to annual meeting and it was like, kinda very much a lot of holes.
Yeah, and I would say that
So.
the budget that had been prepared up to that point, it wasn't problematic, it was just a difference in philosophy that we want to make sure we start with compensation and build from there. You can go the other way around, you can say that you build it differently and then you wait for compensation at the end. We just have a different philosophy, and that's how we built the budget. So it wasn't that all the numbers were factual, everything was accurate, it's just we have a different philosophy on the way we wanted to build it.
Any other comments?
well, just that regardless of how well we plan, we don't know the numbers from the state until we get the numbers from the state.
So you had to be conservative and assume for the worst, if you're gonna, budget fiscally responsibly.
That's what we've always tried to do.
Yep, and to be perfectly clear, I don't anticipate too many times where I'll be sitting here saying I don't think we should levy to the max, because there's no indication that the school funding formula is gonna change rapidly in our favor. We've got a couple things working against us, in terms of the state budgeting formula. They're really good for our community, and that's the piece that we need to understand. When we feel this hit, where our local responsibilities increase and the state responsibilities decrease, that's because we're a financially vibrant district. Not the district itself, but all of the communities we serve. It's because of the growth in the community and things are happening that spread that out, increase our tax base, and shift the responsibilities to the local taxpayer. There's no indication that's gonna slow down. There's a lot of development in the works being planned. So it is possible this will happen a couple years in a row. Unless something really miraculous happens, I wouldn't anticipate coming to the table with a suggestion for an under levy again, because at a certain point, we just can't function. I just personally feel we're okay this time. But I appreciate the perspectives greatly, and I honestly, and I'm not just saying this to not disagree, I agree with everything being said. I agree, it seems odd not to levy to the max when we have expenses that we need to account for, but I also agree that it is really important that we demonstrate fiscal responsibility, because this $100,000 this 1 year is nothing compared to the needs we might have in the future. And I'm trying to think long-term.
I just had one other clarification. I think some people were under the impression that this 10% increase would just be 1 year, but this will be next year as well.
We have no idea. I don't even want to speculate. It's too complicated to speculate that I'm not sure.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, so the process now, this will come back in 2 weeks for the final approval of the budget. Okay, so it'll be on October 20th meeting. In the event things change between now and then, I assume you'll keep us updated?
Yes, and so plan and update October 15th or 16th. That's when we'll get the final numbers. We'll definitely share those out before the meeting, so you'll know the final numbers, and you'll have, once we get those, then Rod will plug everything in. We'll have another document that looks like this, so you can see it based on the final actuals.
Thank you.
All right, item number 6, superintendent report.
All right, so before we get into the report, and I wish everyone just wouldn't have gone, but Cody's here for this, so that's good, thank you. It is Board Member Appreciation Week. So wanted to make sure that we let you know that we really do appreciate you, and this is a tough job. Being a board member is not an easy job. It is one of the most thankless jobs that you can be in when it comes to community service, because you have taxing authority. And because you have taxing authority, you have a lot of people with a lot of opinions coming at you on the regular, and you deal with a lot of complex situations. So your service is very much appreciated, and the partnership that we're developing is also very much appreciated. So happy School Board Appreciation Week. Now on to referendum invoices. How's that for a transition? So there's just the one, this is to Market and Johnson. We are getting there with our final spend down. As we will be coming to you probably within the next month or so to talk about the contingency that's left, because we'll have dealt with all of the stuff that we know we need to contend with contingencies. We're in a pretty good spot. We are still dealing with a few minor issues in the PAC, but the grand opening was a huge success. Everything worked great, the technology worked, everything was wonderful, it was a great celebration. So that was a relief, right? You go into that just going, okay, I hope everything works, and everything was wonderful. Still dealing with a few issues on the Follow Spot platform, that some minor adjustments. The solution they had was close, but not quite where we needed to see, and they're working on that very well. Market Johnson and Wold have been very responsive to our concerns and any issues that we have. When you get down to the end of a project, you get in details, it gets nitpicky. So you're noticing little things. When you're starting and you're putting up walls, everything is great. And if you have suggestions for change, they're big and everyone sees them. When you get to the end, we're down to the details, but we're getting there. Like another example is Wi-Fi hotspots. We need to figure out, so it's owner responsibility to get up our hotspots. We'd have no way to get up to the ceiling where those hotspots would go. So we're like, oh, okay, we need to talk through some of these issues. But all in all, going very well. We'll be wrapping up everything shortly. Next thing we have on there is donations in the district website. So actually, Alicia and I were talking shortly after the meeting last time. Conversations about donations came up. And we know that there have been folks that are willing and wanting to donate to the district, but for whatever reason, the process, something got lost in the process. So we want to tighten that up. So we're gonna leverage the Scoop for that. So in our community announcements in the Scoop, we'll have our process for folks that want to donate, or if an organization says, you know what, we would like to donate. So as an example, let's say that an organization says they would like to donate to the district or a specific program, that will be laid out for them there so we don't lose it. We don't have the details yet, but we wanted you to know that we hear you and we want to clean that up for two reasons. One, it's not a good look if someone wants to donate to the district and it gets lost in the shuffle. But two, these funds, and we'll talk about one later, they go to really good use. And we want to make sure that we respect that commitment and that we honor the folks that are willing to help us do what we want to do for kids. Next one up there, just stop me if you have questions at any point, otherwise I'll just keep going. Third Friday count. So this is the format that we'll be bringing to you for the official counts. The way this works, the pink line is September, that's what we want to focus on. We'll always compare back to the last official count. So in this case, the last official count would have been last year, 2025. So you can compare those numbers, but this totals up everything that we need to report to DPI. If you notice that gray bar between columns V and X, I guess that would be W, we just can't see it. That's typically what lands between V and X. You'll see that gray bar there. That was a joke. You know, thank you. Okay. Appreciate it. That shows the line between everything that counts toward DPI and the other stuff that we track incidentally. So to the right of that line, that doesn't technically fit into that sum total. If you look, column V, row 18, that's the count, our FTE count. It's important to understand that when we talk about FTE or the full-time equivalent, we're not talking about the students in the seats in the school. That's the beginning of that conversation, but then it takes into consideration things like tuition waivers, open enrollment. So this is all of those calculations in one document, and essentially what gets reported to DPI. We break it out, so when Rhonda's the person that submits this to DPI, she just has grade bands, so elementary, middle school, high school. We break it out by grade level. She fills this out for us so we have a good idea of where things are heading. So you can see from January to September, we're down about 23 students. In terms of students in seats, it's slightly more than that, but our summer school numbers were strong, so it's a slight decrease year over year. I point that out because when we look at that other document and we're looking grade by grade, you see increases, but what takes that away is graduating much larger classes than we're bringing in JK and kindergarten. So it appears that that's starting to shift favorably, but way too early to predict anything. I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. The one thing that we do have some level of influence or control over is open enrollment out and in. That will be our focus. When we talk about enrollment, that's the area that we can have the most direct influence. Previously, the administrative team has done a nice job of tracking that. I've seen the tracking documents where they're reaching out individually to families that are choosing open enrollment. So we've got a really good basis for a process. We'll continue that and make sure that we're reaching out to folks and finding out why they're making those choices, and then, but not just talking to them, also seeing what the themes are and seeing if there's things we can do programmatically to entice folks to stay here. It's one thing to have open enrollment in, that's always great, but if we focus on creating the best possible experience for our resident kids and the extra benefit is open enrollment in, that's great. But I'm more concerned with reducing open enrollment out. That's my greatest concern when it comes to enrollment.
So in the columns here, column S, you have OEOD, that's open enrollment.
Out of district, yes.
And then column, it's there, Z would be open enrollment in.
Yeah, and that's where it gets goofy because open enrollment out students count in our FTE count, but then we pay the districts that they go to. So this is where it's a very different look than what students we have. Our numbers are kind of close, 167 to 181, but if we were in a different situation, like let's say we were open enrollment plus 400 and out was 100, it would look very goofy because our student count would be significantly different than the actual students that we're serving in our schools.
So is that why, for example, in the enrollment document that we got at the September meeting, we have 115 eighth graders?
Yes.
But on this document, we only have, what, 89? 99? 99.
Yep, I'd have to look specifically to make sure that that's the case. I don't want to answer that one without comparing both, but that there will be a difference in the students that we serve because of open enrollment. That probably is what is driving that difference, but let me confirm and compare both documents to make sure.
Yeah, because I saw it in sixth grade too. I think we had, what, like 104 on our document last month. But now on this document, sixth grade only says 89.
Yep, and that could very well be because you see it's 49 out and 45 in middle school. So if that is distributed goofy in grades, it could make a pretty big swing.
Okay,
But I will confirm.
thank you.
Anything else on this?
All right, got my notes. School security, so this is gonna be very brief because we have this on closed session as well. But I do wanna thank all of our emergency service provider partners. St. Croix County really stepped up. They put together a very good exercise for us when we had our tabletop exercise just last week. We had a lot of partners on board, so between St. Croix County and then some state folks as well, and then all of our local agencies were involved. Super, super helpful. We had Lakeview EMS there. Everyone participated, everyone took it very seriously. We learned from one another. We would throw out some ideas, and there were a couple that we threw out, or the specific that I threw out. They're like, I don't know if that's best practice, and they would advise us. So it was a very good, open conversation where we learned from one another. Very much appreciate the time that they put into that. Natasha Burnell from St. Croix County organizes much of what occurred, and it was great. They were very, very well prepared with a thoughtful exercise where we went through a scenario. We can talk more about that in closed session, specifically what that scenario was. But it was good. We learned a lot, and we have a plan going forward to continue to learn with one another. And that's all I've got on that until closed session.
All right. Any questions for Dr. Gramble on any of that stuff? All right, item number 7, consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve any or all of this?
Make a motion to approve 7A, 1 and 2, and B1.
Motion by Bruce, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Danny. Any discussion? Did you want to discuss that donation at all?
I did, thank you. Yes, so there's a donation listed there, and it's a sizable donation. I wanted just to mention it because we're very pleased and humbled by the donation. So it's from Johnson Motors, and it's for a total of $4,000, and that's a really sizable donation. So we want to thank Johnson Motors. We certainly let them know already, but it means a lot to us that they thought of us with this donation. We went over there to receive the donation. It was they shared the story of their company, and it's been around for a long, long time. And they were selling cars as Johnson Motors when most people didn't have cars. So long history, super interesting. But we wanted you all to know, and Johnson Motors too, if they happen to be one of the 13 people watching this on YouTube, that the donation, the $4,000, is going to go directly to student activities. So there's 2 groups that we're looking at launching. I don't want to announce them because it might not land there, but it is certainly going to go to 2 new student activity groups, seed money for both of those, so $2,000 for 2 separate programs to get new activities and clubs launched for kids. So again, very much appreciated.
And I saw the picture.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was on our school district Facebook page, maybe?
Probably, yeah.
Well, wasn't this something too, people had to go and they could say where the money was, like
Buy a
over the
car,
summer,
get
so like there's
service.
people who
Yeah,
went there, helped fund this, so this
Yeah.
was brought up to us a couple months ago.
Mhm.
So everybody who went there and, you know.
I think it was
spent
last
money
spring
there.
even,
Yeah, it was a
like
long time
March
ago.
or.
Yeah, I think we brought it up a long time ago.
Yeah.
So everyone who did that, thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item number 8, general information. October 20th is our next meeting. That's a regular session. There's a listening session 30 minutes prior, so please come and speak with the board members that will be there. And then number 9, district celebrations. Danny, is there a
I don't have anything tonight.
Okay. Bruce?
Yeah, thanks to EMS for coming with you guys, work with school. And then also the grand opening, everyone who was part of the grand opening, everybody who helped set it up ahead of time, who performed. It was awesome to watch all the different groups. There was cheer, dance, choir, community choir. I mean, there was a lot of different groups who went to that and showed everything that can happen in that space. So not just a band. So everybody, thanks for everybody helped set that up and made that happen, because I think that was a great event, and Lori spoke. Good.
Very briefly.
Yeah, smart. No, that's all I got.
Lori?
Well, just to add a little bit more to what Bruce said, I mean, it was fabulous. And thank you to all those who made it a special event. We had staff members who organized it. The music boosters were a big part of it. They provided refreshments for the intermission. The alumni who came back It was so great, going in the hallway after, for the intermission and running into all those kids that I used to have in class. The alumni and the community members who participated in the band and the choir. And as fabulous as the front of the house is, where you go in and you sit and you see this wonderful stage and the seats going up, what really is fabulous is the back of the house and the structures that we have in place for the sets to go up and down, and the workspace that we have, and the pre-production space, and the flexibility of the orchestra space for musicals, and the lighting and the sound. It's just spectacular. So it was a great event. We had a successful tour with the alumni at the high school Friday night, and thank you to Dr. Gramble for leading that. The alumni thoroughly enjoyed seeing the high school and the stadium and the Performing Arts Center. It was a beautiful night for the homecoming game, and we had the biggest 50-50 winnings for the Somerset Memorial Scholarship Fund that we've ever had in the history of the SMSF. So that was fabulous. And also thank you to the Middle School Student Council, the advisors, Don Peer and Ryan Herring. I don't even know how many years they've been the advisors for the Middle School Student Council, but this past weekend they had that clothing giveaway at the middle school, and there were other staff involved and students and volunteers who helped with that free clothing drive. It was overwhelmingly successful, and it showed what a huge need we have in our community. Thank you.
Ian?
I'll say the grand opening was amazing. The biggest thing I noticed about the BAC is the sound. The acoustics are amazing in there. Beats the cafetorium by a long shot. It's also, is it Coaches Week? We just day.
Coaches, National Coaches.
National Coaches Day. So thank you to all of our coaches. That's it.
Corey?
Yeah, I mean, it's been fun watching all the sports, and to all the coaches that are doing a lot of extra time. You know, kids in those sports, it's very appreciative when you don't have time to do it yourself, maybe next year. And just been hearing so many positive things from other parents and from our own kids about their overall experience and teaching and good interactions with their teachers. So just great positive start to the week. Thanks,
Steve? I'll be quick. Performing Arts Center just takes us to the next level, so it's great.
All right, and I have nothing else to add on top of all that stuff. Is there a motion to adjourn into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851D to consider strategy for crime detection or prevention related to school safety plans and building security?
So moved.
Motion by Corey, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Steve. Any discussion? All in favor?
Roll call in.
Yeah, Steve, roll call.
Yes.
vote. Corey? Ian?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes.
Danny?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Motion passes. We are in closed session. 7:00.